Hello, and welcome to another episode of Thoroughly Thriving, where we're putting human back in human capital solutions. On today's episode, we're going to hear from an industry leader where they're sharing their thoughts, feedback, and perspective on what's happening in today's world of work. Well, let's stay tuned and perk our ears up for another exciting episode. Well, welcome to another episode of Thoroughly Thriving. And I am thoroughly excited for today's episode because today our guest is Junior Laysa, who's the Senior Vice President and Head of Operations at Nkarta. So Junior has built and led operations in biotech space where the stakes are real. Science is complex and capital is finite. The timelines are aggressive and cross-functional alignment isn't optional. It is truly survival. He's not coming at a culture from theory. He's built it from the inside out, aligning R&D, clinical, manufacturing, and corporate functions to execute in highly regulated, high-growth environments. Junior has seen what happens when alignment works and when it doesn't. In industries like life sciences, culture isn't about perks. It's about clarity, accountability, resilience, and execution under pressure. So today we're going to unpack how leaders build durable cultures, how you drive change without losing momentum, and what actually separates high-performing teams from the average ones. So welcome to the show, Junior. Sean and I are really excited to have you, and I know our listeners are going to really enjoy this episode. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. And, it's funny how we even got to this moment today. I think the two of you met on an airplane, right, Darren? Is that how this went down?
It was on a Southwest flight where there aren't assigned seats. And I was coming back from a conference in San Francisco. And lo and behold, Junior sits not right next to me because that would be a little weird. It was one seat over. There was space in between us, but I looked over and saw that he worked at Nkarta, and the rest was history. So yeah, we met on a plane. It was serendipitous, Sean.
Well, great. Well, I'm looking forward to today's episode because we are going to land the plane in about 25, 30 minutes. But before we do, I want to dive into some questions for Junior because Junior, your expertise and experience, I think is going to be enormously valuable for a lot of our folks that just in the audience are listening and growing in their careers or just want to hear from a slightly different perspective. I think you bring a unique perspective that many of the guests we've had on from other functional areas may not necessarily always think about and consider. And so I think it's going to be a really powerful conversation today. But I want to start out with our first question. You've worked at some great companies where you've led operations and worked on scaling and worked through a lot of these key aspects of the operational function. And yet, I think you would probably agree it's not always about headcount, but it's how well do the people work together? How do they work together in complex environments and ambiguous environments? But all of that comes from great leadership. And so can you tell us a little bit about how have you helped to intentionally shape culture in these organizations while scaling your teams in these high growth, highly regulated environments? And what are maybe some of the early choices you had to make that matter the most for the future?
Good question, Sean. Yeah, I think I've had a lot of opportunity to build teams, but also just reconstruct them. And I think the one key thing that really stands out is just establishing connection, right? So you got to work backwards from what you want this team to do. Like, what is the goal? So high functioning, whether they're, a team that's 50 people or 10 people, you want them to work together well. So I think one of the things that I try to drive right away is how are the teams connecting? So I really watch and observe to see how people are connecting with each other. And sometimes it isn't just organic, right? There are some people that just don't really connect with others. There's some that are more quiet. So what can we do intentionally to make that happen? And one of the things that I've done is I just requested homework. So one of the things I've done as a coach in sports is I didn't think it was going to work in the biotech space was, help me understand. Like, I'm like, Sean, tell me a little bit about Darren. And then it's your homework. You have like a week to kind of figure out something about Darren that you're going to bring to the meeting. So instead of having these attendances, when we're in smaller companies, it's not so important to have an attendance. So I remove the attendance piece, and I replace that with the homework. The first 10 minutes of a meeting is people going to tell something special about the other person. And it's kind of hard because, like, Junior, what's a fun fact? We always hear that, what's a fun fact? So I make it really, really specific. And so in the beginning, I make it really easy. So I'll start off with food. So what is Darren's favorite food? So it's your job, Sean, not now, but like within the course of a week, to find time to intentionally interact with Darren and find out what that is. Similar to sports, I also had a consequence. In sports, when people didn't do it, we ran extra laps together, myself included. In the workplace, you can't really do that, right? We're not going to be running laps in there. So I would say, okay, well, you're going to drive the meeting next week. Because some people would be really fearful of that. I'm like, oh my God, like I don't want to drive the meeting or something along those lines. And it really helped people to connect and understand like what's important to other people or, outside of work. And sometimes I didn't really know if it was going to work, but it did. And I just continued that trait. So connection.
That's great, Junior. I love that. I love how there's somewhat of a reward, let's call it a consequence, right? And it's finding that tension between those two that are going to have those individuals meet that goal. So I appreciate that. Junior, looking at your background and through our conversations, you've been involved in operational leadership through major shifts. How could you not be, especially over the last several years across the biotech landscape? This includes big mission pivots and either developing or supporting organizational priorities. In your opinion, your experience, Junior, when a company is changing direction, what's your process to maintain alignment, keep morale high, and execute at a high velocity across a variety of teams?
Good question, Darren. I think one of the shifts that's probably the most major one that happens in biotech all the time is reduction in force. And this is like a very, very, very common thing that people see. And it's traumatic, whether you experience it 5 times or 10 times. So I've, unfortunately been in 5 of those situations. I was blessed to not have been riffed myself, but as a leader, for probably 3 of those, it's important to kind of share your experience, right? So you say, okay, well, and the thing I do the most, and it's going to be weird, but I do this all the time. And people are like, what's that? People know that as options and opportunities. So I'm always asking people, like when I walk around, I don't say anything and I'm doing this. It's I want you, like even at the darkest hour, sometimes things seem so dark, you got to find the option and the opportunity because it is there for you. In the event of something like a riff, right? You use your connection and you help people feel like, okay, let's feel this for a minute, listen first because you can't just keep talking, and find out what's important and then outline some of those opportunities. Every person wants something different, and some people are not going to be very vocal about it. So it's important for you to outline that as a leader. You got to say, hey, I'll put in something out there. The reduction in force caused less people to help with a tech transfer. You have a skill set that I really think could bridge that gap. You can leverage both sides. And I think there's a growth opportunity, not just growth from a promotion side, but then this will help you because our job as leaders to help people understand and focus their roles so that even beyond the current company that they're at, that they will be successful. We have to care about their current role and how we shape them for their next role. Because as we know, biotech is very volatile.
That's really great. I heard it said recently that great leadership isn't just about making sure that things get done, but it's about really truly developing your people to be able to do more. And I think, there's really a foundational piece behind, as you're talking about from a leadership perspective. Gosh, I love the opportunities, thinking about, yeah, it's difficult, it's challenging. We're going to call it out, but what are our opportunities from it? What can we do? We're still here. And, how can we ultimately, move things forward in a way that can be productive, that can be beneficial? And I love that perspective. And I love just that visual, that you're reinforcing culture with a visual. You don't even have to say it because you're helping to establish it even just through, the visual. And I think, great leaders help to reinforce culture even through little things. I'm sure there's other people around the office that would probably even do that just in hearing your name, because there's a tie to it. But you're really reinforcing culture and holding people accountable without having to have another meeting on another meeting on another meeting. But with all the years that you've had to build these teams, how would you describe, I guess, your strategy for identifying and developing leadership instincts in kind of first-time people managers or first-time line managers, or to make sure that they're carrying the same culture that you are, and especially even in technical organizational environments? What are the best ways that you've seen that can help establish those earlier in their career leaders?
That's a hard one, but I'll tell you, Sean, you said maximizing talent. So I think that's the approach that I've always had, was whether it's a leader that's a first time leader or one that's later in their career. I always say, like, how are we maximizing the talent? Because you can be the smartest person, but if you're not bringing out the best in the people around you, I mean, the company's not going to move forward. Your company's, there's a team of you. So if you can't maximize that team, then you're just a very smart individual, but you're not really helping people. So there is something that I do that helps people, again, on the connection level. So first time managers and things, they always come to me like, Junior, and they're so stoked. I said, I'm not going to teach you about all the administrative stuff. That's easy. I can help you with the HR pieces and all that stuff. That's fine. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is, how are you connecting with the team? The way to connect with the team is find out. It's not to be friends with everyone, but it's to find out what people value. And if you find out what people value, then you can help them. I can't just say, hey, Darren, here's a maple donut. Hey, Sean, here's a maple donut, because I like a maple donut. You might not like that. So this exercise that I do, that I was given by an awesome project manager when I was early in my career, it's like a grid with like 35 different values, ranging from, wanting to influence, wanting to present, more money, promotions, time with family, work-life balance. And so with all these 35 different values that are on there, the exercise that you would give your direct reports is that I want you to place a dollar amount up to $10,000 across this grid. And the higher the dollar amount, the more you value that value. The second step to this is you put a red, a yellow, and a green. So the red meaning value that you don't feel that could be accomplished here at whatever company you're at. And the green one means, again, yes, it can be accomplished. And then the yellow one means, like, I'm not too sure. And that's where we as leaders owe it to them to find out. So when you submit that to me and I say, okay, well, Sean and Darren, I see that they value time with family, and they the power to influence. How can I build off these values and make them so that they can be real here at wherever we're at?
That just breeds, that communicates, that conveys the culture that you've created, right? When you're able to tap in and then be fully aware and even optimize what someone holds in high value. And Junior, I believe that really fortifies the culture. It really does. But when we think about the sector, the market, the industries that we're in and that we support and you work in on a day-to-day basis, what's really at the apex of all of that is innovation. And you can have the best innovation, but if you don't have a culture, then it's not going to ultimately advance global health. It's not going to meet the endpoints that we all want to do, which is to support patients, right? But in your experience, right, I know that biotech teams often have to balance the scientific rigor, the operational excellence, and really come up with creative problem solving, right? That's the innovation part of it. But going back to your experience, Junior, what cultural traits that best support innovation while still driving disciplined execution have you seen work? And then how do you cultivate that within the teams that you get to be a part of?
Driving innovation forward. I think if you're going to maximize the talent around you, because everyone's word is valuable, you got to create a space where people feel safe to share their ideas. So psychological safety. How many times have we been in a room where somebody's quiet, but they're like really, really smart, and you're like, wow, I wish that person would have talked more. And I think it takes like leaders like ourselves, like Sean, Darren, you made me feel very welcomed right off the bat, right? Creating that environment daily for people. So expecting that from all leadership. If you're in a leadership role, you have to be able to tap into everyone, and then make sure that okay, create the platform, right? If you don't just go up there and say, hey, good job, but like, how are you going to showcase that person if you know that person has something they could do, and you got to pair up with them, because they may not be someone that wants to come forward, but you find ways to highlight that person's like talent or whatever, to bring their ideas forward, and always bring them with the credit to it, so that they can see whether they want to talk about it or not, that wow, like what I'm doing is important. I need to continue I need to keep talking to Darren, because I know Darren's going to be able to push my ideas forward. I think that's big. And I think collaboration is just the biggest thing. I think I see it everywhere I go, where people say like, oh, I'm in the best department. I mean, that's great and all, but for me, I kind of frown on that, because I feel like, yes, things can be competitive. I'm competitive, but be competitive as a company, not be competitive as a department. Because if you're like going to squash another department because I have the best team, and you don't give a f about what's going on that side, well, guess what? If their success is your success, and the same thing is if they fail, you're failing too, because you're failing together as a company. I think one of the things that are tangible that does work well, and I'll put in, of course, in my space, is when let's say you have PD, you have manufacturing, and you want to bring something forward into the clinic and create something, rather than you have this innovation of this, I don't know, this special piece of equipment that you want to bring into manufacturing. From inception, you should be bringing the teams along very early. You bring your quality partner, you bring your manufacturer, your success will go higher. And at the end result, don't have that one department present, have like that core group of like one individuals, kind of give them a platform to speak to it. And then they kind of shared ownership of a common goal will really maximize things.
Oh, that's really good. And I love the idea of collaboration, right? I mean, I think we talk about it all the time. It's a key to success. And to your point, how many times is the person in the room with the answer you've been looking for? They're already there. And we just did not create a space where they felt psychologically safe to be able to share. And that was the thing that could have saved us 6 months or a year of taking the long way. And yet we just pridefully as leaders like drove right through the stop sign. Let's keep going. Let's keep this thing driving. And, we just missed it. And, in preparation for this, I was thinking about collaboration as being such a key aspect to everything we do. So I had a question for you around collaboration. So I'm glad that you already kind of teed it up for me. So, where you're at now at Nkarta, for example, you have all of these functions. You've got R&D, you've got clinical and regulatory and operations, everybody, and you've got to sync together. But what's easy, especially as we've expanded into more and more remote work and everything else, is silos can form pretty quickly, and so if we're not careful, to your point, you end up more competitive than collaborative when it comes to your silo, your area, your specific thing. Is there anything practically that you do? I know you mentioned obviously bringing in quality early and things like that, but is there anything practically that you like to do as a structure or behavior to break down those silos and really foster genuine collaboration, even if it's, something a little more fun?
Yeah, well, I think from a CMC leadership perspective, one of the things I do drive is like really easy things. If we have a thought that's coming through on the development side, I always ask. I said, hey, before you bring it to our CMC leadership, kind of tap into the R&D side, and find out like, hey, what is their recommendation on this? They may not have one, but I think sharing that over. So I think we've gotten to this habit now that when we do share things, we're like, oh, hey, by the way, our R&D partners did recognize this. And it becomes more of a habit and a routine rather than like, okay, I have to do this because Junior said to do this. Like, I don't ever want to lead that way. But I think that is one thing. I think one very tangible thing is what I had just mentioned is creating a platform and a group to do this. So one of the things I like to see are not just update meetings, because like you can just keep updating, but like from week to week, are things really changing? Why don't we be a little bit more intentional about what we're trying to deliver in a meeting? So these monthly or every 6 weeks, I put together a CMC subgroup, necessarily the leadership, but middle managers, and they are, whether it's regulatory quality, QC, PD, manufacturing, MSAT, facilities. And so this is a new group with two co-captains in there that are really driving the content of the updates, but then helping people understand what are the risks in each department. And I want that group to meet with themselves. Hey, not with leadership, because a lot of times they're able to solve problems with just that group. Now, the result is at the end of their meeting, they'll still write down what are their risks, and then they'll have like an opportunity to present that to leadership like every month or every 6 weeks, depending on what they feel is appropriate. So you're not just having a meeting just to have a meeting, and that group gets more connected. And remember, it ties back to what we were saying with the homework question, right? So they don't all know each other as well. So now they have a homework question, but now they have to show us fun facts. So we play this guess who game. So before you even start the game, then they're going to say somebody on our team graduated from Harvard and is the first person to be living in America. And then it's, they have two fun facts. There's 20 of them, So we also get to know more about our, the rest of our team, and that's not just leadership.
Oh, that's great. It is hard to stay in a silo when you actually work hand in hand with each other. It's just, and you get to know each other. It's now personal. It's not just, there's not a distance. I love that.
Junior, over the last several months, as we've gotten to know each other better, there's so many things that stick out to me about how you are as a human, and second, as a business leader. And you exhibit and exude so much passion for people. And that's been evidenced through the conversation that we've already had today. And so I'm very thankful that there's someone like yourself in the industry that's passionate about driving culture. You do it with purpose too. So that's been very, very evident to me. So thank you. Throughout my career, to the audience and to Junior, I've worked with hundreds of companies throughout my career being on the human capital solutions side. And I can tell you that I've never met a leader throughout my career that says they do not care about culture. Everyone says they care about culture. But the flip side of that is few can truly articulate what that means and how they measure culture. Right? How they measure it. You've already shared some of those items throughout our conversation today. But Junior, based on your leadership experience, what are the most predictive culture signals, or dare I say metrics, how you quantify or how you measure, how you track whether a team is healthy or headed into trouble, and I'm a firm believer that you need to be able to inspect what you expect. There's got to be some inspection there, right? You got to kind of check things out to ensure that there's alignment. But yeah, how do you track whether a team is healthy or maybe in troubled waters?
This one's a hard question of all the ones. I think for me it's speed, but it's also how fast can you arrive at a decision. So when I'm thinking about a healthy culture, I think you realize that speed is of essence. So you're able to talk, freely, and you can arrive at a decision early. But if you're finding yourself and you're just kind of dragging, that could be a sign. But I don't want to say that is a sign. I think for me, the true one is probably engagement and initiative. So when you normally are looking around the room and you're seeing people and it's just like directive after directive, and maybe it's me, you, and Sean sitting in a room and we're quiet, then there's probably a problem there. If you're not seeing the three of us talking, it's probably we're like maybe we don't feel safe, or this isn't for us. There are also one-offs here and there. I think it's important again to check in, but I think the biggest indicator is the level of engagement that you're getting from people.
So true, and kind of close that question a bit. I fully agree. I think if there's no engagement, that's going to lead to an underperforming team. If it just comes from the top down, that's going to lead to an underperforming team. If the engagement comes from, let's just say, a few, well, that can sustain an average team. There's going to be kind of ticks up and then it's going to tick down a bit. But in my experience, Junior, is when the engagement comes from within, right? When it's propagated like internally, that's what takes an average team to a high performing team, right? When that's really the culture where it doesn't have to come from the top down, doesn't have to come from the two people kind of waving the flag or beating on the drum. When everyone's locked arms, focused on a mission, rowing at the target at the same speed, that's what takes an average team and really excels them to a high performing team. So no, I appreciate that.
There's an overarching theme that I'm catching from today's discussion, Junior. And what I love is that I think people will read a title and see operations and think, oh, okay, he's focused in the minutia, he's focused in the numbers, he's focused in the spreadsheet. But there's really 3 C's that have stuck out to me from today's conversation. They're really how you set up a great culture is starting with good communication. You've got great collaboration, and you also have great community. You actually look out for one another, you get to know one another, and you spend a lot of the time. And I think you work with really brilliant people who have the greatest of intentions most of the time to be able to all drive in the same direction. But if you're focusing big picture, what I'm hearing a lot of is really that communication piece of talking to one another and really drawing out, creating a safe space to be able to speak your mind and your thoughts and get the best ideas out on the table, but also that collaborative across functions, across groups, across areas to be able to all be working in the same direction. And then ultimately building community where you're talking about even fun facts around each other, that then no longer is that person just the person who hasn't responded to my email yet, but they're the person that, oh man, we had that great laugh in that meeting. Oh, I learned a lot about their family, or I learned a lot about whatever. And, it allows you to work at a different level, but also create such incredible culture. And Junior, I've learned a lot today. It's been really beneficial and helpful for me, Darren. I don't know about you, but it's definitely been a really productive and quick episode in my mind. But, it's Junior, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me have this opportunity to share with you. It's not often I get to share like these things or get these types of questions. Usually they're like technical, like, hey, how are you going to move this faster? So I really appreciate this conversation, and hopefully it helps.
Yeah, no, this is great. One is, as we wrap another episode, to our audience, we just want to remind you here at Thoroughly Thriving, we actually buy into a lot of the same things that Junior does, that really we believe foundationally that we've got to collaborate. That's why we even have this podcast, is to share incredible stories and voices and experiences of great leaders in our community who really add value to you. But as we always remember, and we close every episode to remember on Thoroughly Thriving, that we can only win as one as we work as one. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you for joining us today for another great episode of Thoroughly Thriving. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to share it with those in your world. If you'd like to learn more about the Thorough Group, please go to thoroughgroup.com. And remember that we will all remain thoroughly thriving if we continue to work as one and win as one.